when you look at the overall development of electronica music, the thing that disappoints me today is that you listen to a drum and bass song that just came out, it sounds exactly like a drum and bass song from when it first came out.
Goldie or something, yeah.
What's the point of that?
It's an echo, I think.
So, but it's not just that. To me, it feels like let's not even talk about top 40 music, because every time I turn on Kiss Radio, I hear the same song.
It's like a formula.
It's a formula. And I feel that everything now is a formula. Yeah. Everybody has their thing that they like. I'm really good at house music because I got the deal and I got these remixers and I got these clients and this is my shtick. That's what I'm going to shtick to. And so that's all I can do or want to do. Mm-hmm. And I feel too many people are doing that because they're just so comfortable and nobody has the guts anymore to do something that's
more creative
or just different.
Amigos de La Última Canción, bienvenidos otra vez. Aquí estamos con nuestra amiga Jess, de nuevo en nuestro programa. Aquí está Cristian, está nuestro invitado Bjorn, que es productor musical y cineasta, que viene de la ciudad de Dusseldorf, de donde viene la banda de Kraftwerk, quien va a estar tocando y va a estar aquí por 10 días consecutivos en mayo. Entonces vamos a conversar y a tener una buena información sobre la vida de Bjorn.
Entonces, bueno, vamos a hablar de lo interesante que es el krautrock, que es el movimiento de música alemana que surge alrededor de los 60. Es un movimiento de posguerra que es muy importante porque le da una identidad a la cultura alemana. Pero acá tenemos a Bjorn que nos va a contar más en profundidad cómo fue ese tiempo. Él viene de la ciudad de Düsseldorf, él vivió de cerca, digamos, este fenómeno, así que vamos a tener una interesante conversación donde nos va a contar detalles de cómo se hicieron los discos, del productor que había detrás, así que thank you for coming, Bjorn. A la gente Bjorn que habla español vamos a hablar en inglés en esta oportunidad, así que por favor, si pueden ahí meterse igual porque hacen muy buena información acá. So, hi, Bjorn, how are you?
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure for us. It's a pleasure for us. So let's start. Tell us something about yourself, or where you were from, your backgrounds, and whatever you want to tell us about your...
Okay, well, I grew up in Düsseldorf, so that's where Kraftwerk is from. So I was probably about 10 years behind these guys. Mm-hmm. And... therefore, naturally, they were my idols. And it was also basically at the time where, as we all know, synthesizer was a new thing. And I was very glad to have my first synth in the year of 1978, I believe. I think I was only 15 years old, so that was before driving. So I couldn't really participate in, business activities at that time yet. But once I had left high school, I think past 82, 83, I basically started out working in studios and hanging out with all these guys and, pretty much lived through the very last end of this region.
The last wave.
The last wave, so to speak, yes. I mean, so there's this very interesting book called Electricity, and it's about Düsseldorf and the School of Electronic Music. And it shows not only our most important person, Connie Plunk, mm-hmm. who was the first engineer and producer of Kraftwerk, not only Kraftwerk records, but pretty much he discovered everybody. Mm-hmm. Because that was back in the day when you had to have a fully functioning, sophisticated recording studio to make high quality recordings.
Especially the type of song that was pretty new, pretty avant-garde.
Yes, and the interesting thing about the synth was that if you created a recording that was made purely out of electronic signals, you didn't have to deal with microphones. You didn't have to deal with amplifiers, distortion, noise, all that stuff. If the only microphone you would use was on your vocal, then all your tracks would be really clean, meaning you could produce a fidelity that was really really high, because back in those days, like late 60s, early 70s, audio technology, high-end audio technology from a listening perspective, people already had really good speakers and amplifiers and turntables and stuff like that. But as far as production technology, it was right on the verge where the analog switched to the digital, and then all this big old Neve console. Now we're going to have a digital thing, but it doesn't sound that good yet. So it was really all happening at that time.
At the same time, people were experimenting with new things, with new tools.
Yes. For instance, let's say these guys were the forerunner of electronic drums. In the 70s, or let's say late 60s and 70s, when the instrument manufacturers like Hammond that made organs, or Yamaha, some of those companies that also made the very first synths. But even though we already had a few synthesizers, we didn't really have drum machines, and we had no samplers. So to have an electronic rhythm, it had to come from a rhythm machine, a rhythm composer, which they were really cheesy back in the days. They had like salsa and rumba and right. But like the cheesiest and crappiest electronic thingy, really terrible sounds. Today it's funny. We use those things as, remember this funny loop from 1971, But so basically what I'm trying to say is there was no capability of performing a drum track. Everything was pre-programmed from these manufactured loops. It wasn't even that you could create that loop. They were created by Yamaha. Who cares about that? So then these people thought, well, actually, I have to turn this back just a little bit. So the reason why Kraftwerk has electronic drums, according to this book, is because Wolfgang, the drummer, when he was called to participate in the band, he had just sold his drum kit. Because he was actually going to quit. And then he gets the call from Kraftwerk. He goes, I can't quit. I got to play with Kraftwerk, obviously. And then when he shows up there, he says, I don't have a drum kit. I just sold it.
Damn.
But this gives us the opportunity to maybe design something and have electronic drums. And maybe we should figure out how they can be triggered so they can actually be played and performed, which they then did as the first ones ever. And I remember I think it was in 1973 when they performed on German television with a live show with an electronic drum kit where they had these needles, these knitting needles, and these little electronic pads. They were like the size of this, and they were not dynamic, meaning the harder you hit it, it doesn't get any louder or different. But just the fact that you could hit that and have that sound.
So it was a game changer. It was a
because now you could create your own beat out of your own sounds. And although they didn't have samplers yet, it was kind of like the same thing because they had dedicated synthesizers or modules for just that sound or just that sound. In case you were ever wondering why Kraftwerk or Tangerine Dream or any of these bands would have unbelievable amounts of equipment on stage.
Yeah.
It's because it takes so much just to produce one sound.
It's very specific.
And you can't change that on the fly to have that completely different sound.
Yeah.
So you really need to have multiple synthesizers. One for song A, one for song B, one for song 3. And if you have 4 or 5 songs,
every different sound for each
song. It has to all be ready to go before the show starts.
But it's also like they created the new machine for that specifically.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
not like
both.
These will just do every other song. It's just
both.
This is gonna be specific for that,
right.
And that's what they make them so unique, I guess, back then.
Right.
Like
especially when it comes to drums.
Right.
Yes.
I'm gonna make these especially to make that sound this way for
right.
the song for the.
So
you guys probably remember Jean-Michel Jarre?
Yes.
Oxygen. I don't know if you ever saw him live, but he was one person, not 4.
Yes.
One. And he had way more equipment on stage than all 4 of these guys combined.
Crazy.
Why? Actually, because one synth just made one sound. And if he just had that, in one song, then that needed to be one dedicated synthesizer that was just ready for that one moment in the show where he just hits that one sound. But he had to have 150 of them on stage to pull off an entire show.
So it's pretty interesting that you mentioned, Jerry, that I had read like an interview that he did like a year or 2 years ago where he talked about how a development of equipment, tools, technology has changed the music even more than the musician itself.
Right.
But in this case, this is my guess, this is what my perspective about Kraftwerk is like. This is a case where musicians, because they were used to play an analog instrument, right? They were like free jazz musician. But they blend with the engineers, they blend with the people who were kind of like make these new tools and prove them, and they kind of like, so it's amazing in that case how they did that. Like, how you feel that happened? How was like the mixture, the blend between engineers and inventors and stuff?
Well, one of the interesting things is that when all these instruments came out, although they were very unique, everybody was able to buy one of those. So Kraftwerk was always smart enough to realize that, yes, we have unique and modern instruments that are different from what people are used to, but we still want to have the extra edge on everybody because we want even our instruments to be so unique and specific that nobody can go and just buy a mini Moog and make the same sound that we make.
They kept it authentic.
They kept it authentic, and how they did that was there was a place called Synthesizer Studio Bonn. And that was the only place in all of Germany where you could buy a synth. Because Moog and Oberheim and all these companies, I mean, a Yamaha synth you could buy at an organ store because they sold Yamaha organs. But outside of that, all these tiny little unique companies that were literally 3 people when they started, like Oberheim or Sequential Circuits or these kind of companies, they didn't have distribution networks in anywhere of Europe at all. So English musicians that had first synths, they flew to America to buy them here and they brought them to England. But in Germany, it's different voltage, so you can't just do that. So basically, these 2 guys, their names were Dirk and Hajo. It's for Hans Jochen. And those 2 guys started the Synthesizer Studio Bonn. And they were in Bonn, which is right south of Cologne, which is only 70 miles away from Dusseldorf, so relatively close. And right next to Cologne where also the big EMI studios were. So they were right close to where all the music production was. And everybody who wanted to buy a synth had to go there to buy a synth. That's where I bought my first synth. That's where these guys bought their synths. There's no other place to go. But the smart thing that Hajo did, he said, hey, I'm going to mod all your stuff. And I'm not going to tell anybody what I did. So only you guys have my mods and no one else will have that. So therefore you guys will have a mini Moog that sounds like no one else's mini Moog. And you guys will have a sequential or an Oberheim or a VCS3 that sounds like no one else's identical thing.
For you guys.
And that's how they were able to have a sound that was so unique.
So what was happening by that time? What was happening around Kraftwerk by that time when they started to become electronic musician? What was the scene?
It's an interesting time, and I think it's worth mentioning that it's not just about music, it's about art in general. And there's this guy, his name is Joseph Beuys. He's one of the bigger artists these days. I don't even know if he's still alive, probably not. But he was the guy that got really famous. He had in the museum, in the New York Museum of Modern Art, I believe, he had a bathtub with a bunch of fat in it.
Fat?
Fat.
Okay.
And that was the art. Just a bathtub with a chunk of fat.
Fight Club movie.
And the cleaning lady came by and she cleaned the bathtub.
She cleaned up the art.
She cleaned out the art. But the other piece that Joseph Beuys is very famous for is a grand piano wrapped in felt. So the entire thing in its full size is wrapped in black felt, and I think it has a red cross on it. And that today is, I think, one of the most expensive art pieces in the world. And Joseph Beuys is also credited actually with starting performance art. The performance piece of Joseph Beuys was to chain himself and his apprentice to the bar stool to illustrate the dependency on the bar of a German person.
So you might say like that scene by then was pretty bubbly, pretty upbeat. Like people were doing like experimenting new things. Like what was the necessity for it?
Well, the interesting thing about Dusseldorf was that it was not like Munich. It was not like Berlin. It was the fashion town of Germany. That's where all the models were. That's where all the advertising agencies were. That's where all the clothing designers were. That's where all the fashion shows happened. So that was Dusseldorf. And so then Joseph Beuys came along, and then all these people thought, well, we don't like Cologne. We don't like Munich. Berlin was in the wall, so forget that. So, hey, Dusseldorf, here we come. And I guess that's what it was. It was just a new type of art form on multiple levels that then attracted musicians to come to the town because they had nowhere else to go that they felt comfortable with. Because everything else was so German and so, if you want to talk about the post-war situation.
Please.
One of the things also that was credited to Kraftwerk was if you look at their appearance, the cleanliness of the haircut and the perfection of the wardrobe. By the way, they also had custom wardrobe. They had custom shoes. I mean, nobody had this stuff. You know what I mean? So they looked different because they had all this stuff that no one had.
Yeah,
which is like kind of like
so now
so like you're talking about the aspect of like the
post-war stuff.
At the same time, it seems like obviously they did it in purpose. They tried to communicate something, which in my opinion is mostly like they tried to vanish behind the music, right? They want to try to be like a uniform. They're just workers that just like operate machines.
Right. Well, that was the Kraftwerk thing.
But that was what you said.
Sure.
Sorry, to me, it feels like also that kind of rigid way of being back there, I guess, for them to be like that, or no? Sorry, that might be just something.
No, I think what we're after here is to figure out how the situation of those times affected the artists and the musicians to produce what they produced. And so I guess it should be mentioned that even in the 60s, I remember a little kid walking around, you would see an entire city block of buildings. And then right after that, there would be an entire city block of nothing. And not only nothing, but a deep, deep hole that goes 4, 5, 6 stories down into the ground. And then right after that, there's a few more buildings. Wow. And then right after that, there's another hole just as deep, just as big. Wow. And the entire city I grew up in looked like that. Wow. So you ask yourself, or your parents, what's happened here? What's going on? Why does it look like this? This is a very inefficient building. Why do they have a hole? Well,
it's the sequences
it was
after the war.
It was only 20 plus years after the war, and they haven't had the time to rebuild it all. Wow. And so because it's very deep, and also a lot of these buildings, like when you go to Berlin today and you look at the Brandenburg Gate or whatever, or you go to Munich and you look at these buildings, or the Reichstag in Berlin, now these are museum pieces. But back then, they weren't really looked at it like that. Back then, we looked at that building as this was the building where not long ago these people were sitting and they made all these really terrible decisions. Wow. And here we are now having to deal with this aftermath. Look.
Yeah.
So they called it Stunde Null, which means 0 hour. Reset. Let's start fresh.
Yeah, because probably it was a huge burden for the culture, for like the identity. And like, I feel that's kind of like Kraftwerk kind of like cut tie with that painful history,
Yes.
right?
Yes, a
It's
little
a
bit.
perfect type of music
Yeah.
because it's something brand new.
Yes.
Liberated.
Super fresh.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
for people in Latin America that might understand what we're talking about, like I might say Kraftwerk for like what for Colombian music is like vallenato, or for Chile is like cueca. It's like the folk. There's a new era. It's like it's the reflection of a whole identity. You know, like that's how game changing it was for German people, right?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And also, if you consider the technology at that time, it was very advanced. No one had ever heard these type of sounds before. But also when you hear them live, I remember the first time I saw them live, and you see Autobahn live, there's that sound that they have where that record opens with, right? And it goes, which is the sound of somebody passing you on the Autobahn because you're doing 150, but the guy behind you wants to go 250, so you got to move over. So that's that sound. And when they played that live, they panned that from the left to the right, to the left. And on a huge stage, that sounds not only epic, no one had ever heard anything like that before. No one had ever heard a sound panning from left to right and back to left. Because when you listen to a rock band, there's your guitar, there's your drums, and there's your thing. And the engineer makes the sound so that it sounds great for the audience. And then that sound usually does not change for the rest of the show. I mean, they have different guitar sounds and their pedals and stuff, but there's no engineer in the back that goes, now let me pan stuff. That has never happened before. And these guys did that. And I mean, everybody's eyes and mouths were just open.
Like looking,
like, what is going on here?
Like very immersive.
It was very impactful. It was literally something that
the son of Kraftwerk is pretty. It brings you a lot of images from the like everyday life. That's something amazing with them. And like how and when you start to get interested about music, how you start on music, like to get into...
I started music when I was 6, actually 5 with the flute. And then as of 6, I played the piano until 18. When I was 15, I got into synthesizers. So that's when all the classical playing kind of
was it something
went
that
away.
What were people in your family also like involved
No,
in
actually, my
music,
family,
or?
everybody was totally against it.
Really?
Yes, I was the black sheep.
Like that's like the usual.
That wanted to do the music thing, and
don't be loud.
Resistant.
Don't do
there was
that.
no support. There was no support. No.
I think
I had to really want it.
every sound that you make is a potential song of what you're talking about. Like whatever sound becomes this new song, this new performance of the sound that you make. Yeah. Wow.
So that's how you like. Okay, you started pretty young, then you grew up around this scene. It might be very exciting for you to be around these idols.
Absolutely,
You were
yeah.
looking out for them, right?
Yes. I mean, like I said, they were about 10 years ahead of me. But still, by the time I got out of the house and I was able to drive around, I remember actually going to, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Einstürzende Neubauten.
Yes.
Okay, I remember going to a show of Einstürzende Neubauten
Well, that's
together
nice,
with
a
Ralph and
mind-blowing
Florian
band,
and Dirk and Hayo from the synthesizer studio. Us 5 went to see Einstürzende Neubauten.
Can you tell them?
Wow.
Can you tell them a little bit about
And
them? Because I can tell, but like
okay,
I want to tell them.
Einstürzende Neubauten. I remember the guy was screaming, and then he takes a plastic bag and pulls it over his head. And then he falls over onto the stage. And he still makes a few movements and noises, but then eventually he stops moving and he stops making noises.
He died?
And everybody thinks,
He's dead.
is he dead? Did he die?
Was this planned?
Nope, that was just part of the show.
Oh my God.
And he did it really well. It was so convincing.
Again, very
But the
performative.
plastic back, it was like a horror movie live in front of your eyes. And then when he was on the
Like a
stage
torture
going,
scene.
And
when he stopped
beside
moving,
they
we're all like,
use like
okay.
metal thing and hit them on stage and every like song they made out of like real things, you know, like not like actual instrument, like
whatever the sound is, it will make the song. It will make
the performance of them is mind blowing.
Really?
Wow.
Yes.
Check that out.
Yeah, check that out.
And I just remember when he fell over and he was like that with a plastic bag. I was looking at Ralph and Florian, and they looked at each other like. I rose up. They're like, okay, whatever. That was pretty funny.
But wait, go ahead. I want to just also know about the guy Connie that you actually got some work from him to work with him, an opportunity in that era that you got called out to be working with him. And what happened?
Okay, so it's a weird story, but as you can imagine, everybody in Germany wanted to work for Connie. Because Connie Plunk was the studio that not only did Kraftwerk, they also did Eurythmics, Annie Lennox, they did Ultravox. I mean, all these people came to Connie because he produced Kraftwerk and they want him. So needless to say, every musician in Germany wants to work at Connie Plunk's studio. And because I was good friends with Dirk and Hayo from the synthesizer studio Bonn, I said at some point, hey, Dirk, can't you just call Connie and get me a job? And he said, sure. I will.
Conexiones.
So he did. So I go over to Connie's studio and I have an interview with him. And I remember how he could sense in me that I wasn't as excited as he expected me to be.
Like
because how could I possibly not be super excited to be sitting there interviewing to be working there?
Yeah.
Like a privilege.
This is a big deal.
And I threw it all away. Because I decided to move to Hollywood where I knew nothing and no one. And this was in 1986. Now, I have to say one thing. This book describes the entire scene of the Dusseldorf electronic music era. And it starts in 1970 and it ends in 1986.
Oh, okay.
When you just...
So I knew it was over.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that was...
And I sensed that.
And he noticed it.
And Connie died a year later because he had cancer.
Oh.
So I guess I did the right thing by coming here.
Wow. Good intuition.
It was just, I mean, of course I loved Kraftwerk and I wanted that job years earlier, but I didn't have the clout to pull it off. And by the time I was able to pull it off, I already sensed that I didn't want to do that anymore because what are you going to do in 1986 after all this already happened?
Yeah.
Then what am I going to do?
Like the cell guide's going to move over to New York maybe. Or
it was also
England.
It was also that Munich had become the center of music really in the 80s and everything shifted from Dusseldorf towards Munich.
Okay.
Which is Giorgio Moroder, Donna Summer, I Feel Love. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But
it's a
Moroder was very unique as from all those Munich artists. The majority of German popular music at that time, and I believe still today, is Schlager. You know what that means?
Yeah.
It's like mariachi music with German lyrics.
Oh, wow.
If you can imagine that. And half of the German top 10 is that.
Yeah.
Maybe not anymore today, but back in those days.
Well, Donna Summer was a huge thing.
And the German type, German pop music, it was just not my thing. Because it was not that. It had nothing to do with Kraftwerk. It was just completely just off the wall. And totally different dimension.
Yeah, different feeling.
Totally different feel. I wanted nothing to do with that. Yeah. Electronic music, great. Synth music, great. But like I said, what are we going to do now that we've just gone through 16 years of this? And I came here.
But then
and I started doing film music, you know, which is also very interesting. And that got me into film. And so I mean, I also had a brief dance chapter. I believe it was from maybe 2000 through 2004 that I had a record deal in New York with a label called Red 7 Records.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little underground dance record label. And, I was able to cut my own records on the lathe. So it was easy and cheaper for me to do that than for others because I didn't have to pay for that mastering because I could do it myself. And then at the same time, I also always knew about numbers, because you can only, from one master, you only make a few stampers and you only make a few thousand records, and then you have to redo it all. So when you make all those things yourself, then you have a better understanding of how many records your company is selling because
you know the numbers.
I'm curious, how was this shift into the film industry? I mean, in terms of music.
It's very interesting. I started out doing mixing and engineering, and then one of my directors that I was working for had offered me the music job for the first time. So not just mixing the sound and the dialogue and the footsteps and the sound effects and all that stuff and the music wherever it comes from, but then actually also create the whole music. And so that was the start for me. And what I like about it is that it brought me to filmmaking, which is a very interesting step because when you are a film composer, you always have to adhere to the existing edit because the director cuts the film or has the film cut. And then once you have the cut, then you look at it and you need to conform the music to the cut. Well, when you're the director and the composer both at the same time, you can move stuff around this way or that way. You don't have to conform anything. And that's really nice. Because I have to admit, you can't ever tell a director, hey, that scene, that should be cut. That should be a little shorter because not only you don't need those last 2 seconds, also the musical transition to the next cut would be way better and smoother and easier. Director doesn't want to hear that. No. The picture is gold. The picture rules.
Everything
is picture. Everything else is secondary. Yeah, I don't agree with that. To me, it's half and half. Yeah. It's a sonic experience as well as a visual experience. So it's not just sounds, it's music or whatever it is that you hear, So it all has to work together. And what I like about filmmaking now is that I have this composer and sound designer background. So when I shoot, I compose. And when I edit, I produce music. Huh. So I have two computers. I have a Final Cut Pro computer and a Pro Tools computer that are completely independent. And I can edit my picture and make scenes longer or shorter. Then I can run the music with that. And then I can say, well, let's shorten this or shorten that, but not just conform to the existing edit because I can change the edit according to changing the music. And that's what I love. That's really good. To have that freedom and
spend more of the time. Yeah.
If I may.
I want to know about these. Come on.
I now may call myself an award-winning filmmaker.
Yes. You too.
And this is the history of laser light shows, basically in Griffith Park, right here in LA. That's where laser shows started in 1971. Funny how that all so works into this timeline, right?
Yeah, it's like parallel.
Following each other.
Perfect.
It's the Pink Floyd. It was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, which was the main attraction for the laser shows, and which ran for 28 years at that place. And Pink Floyd was also one of the very first people to adopt synthesizers and be a lot more electronic than not, if you think about that. But they still had their guitars and their bass and their drums. But it was already very, very electronic for the most part, But not purely electronic.
May I say that I actually went to the last show, the Laserium show in Venice.
Really? How was it?
Amazing. Over the top. It was beautiful, this little room. And the laser machine is like this old school laser machine, not like what you see now. It's like they changed these little glasses things with colors, and you put it in and put it back, and then they put the music. It was like, what, 15, 20 people in this little room.
Probably, yeah.
And you just sit there and have the music and have the lasers like just going through it, and you just it's such a
it's like
wonderful
a dance
experience.
of lights.
And it's gone. Like there's not such a thing of today anymore.
Well, today, as we know, EDC, or if you go to a club, there's lasers everywhere.
Yes.
But today's lasers are beams.
Yeah.
Right? It's beams. Why? Because lasers are now 5 cents. Back then, they were $100,000. Back then, they needed a machine room full of equipment and cooling equipment and all that stuff just to even work.
Yes.
Today, you have this big.
Yeah.
And it's 5 cents. And you can have hundreds of them because it doesn't cost anything and it's no heat and it doesn't take electricity. It's not complicated to run that. But here's the difference between beams and Laserium. As you can see, there are no beams. It's an abstract art form. And the idea of Laserium was not to have laser beams with smoke and fog, but to have the laser go through a transparent surface like glass or plastic or anything that's regular or irregular. And then you observe the abstract forms that are created on the wall as they are moving. And Dr. Elsa Garmeyer, the lady of lasers, was the first person in the world to literally invent laser art. And then Ivan Dreyer, the guy who started Laserium, he looked at that and he said, this needs music.
Of course.
And that was the birth of the Laserium.
It's like a natural conclusion.
Who didn't spend endless hours watching Microsoft music player?
It's just like that.
With a little shade.
Right, exactly. Where did this come from? Laserium.
Wow. Is that the huge structure that when you go to the Griffith Park,
Yes.
it seems like a round black
What she
huge
experienced was a small room which used to be their test room. This actually, what she saw was at the very end when it was no longer in these planetariums all over the world, it was only in their facility in Van Nuys where they invented the equipment and built and created and produced these shows. So they had a little test room that was not anywhere near as gigantic as a planetarium that would seat 500 people. But you were really close to it, too.
Yes.
I mean, it was in your face.
Very close, intimate, like 10, 15 people, and you're just there so dark, and it's like velvet around too.
Right, all black around.
And like you just, it was such a wonderful experience that I was.
I would love to play you a little segment from the movie.
Yeah, please do.
There's this mirror suit artist. She had a mirror suit made for herself, head to toe. She's in a mirror suit. And I thought maybe shooting some lasers on top of that while she's moving around, that's something that Laserium hasn't done before. And yes, it's beams, but it's also abstract stuff on the wall.
So you create like like a ballroom ball?
Exactly. So it's like a ballroom ball, but a person that's moving.
The disco ball.
Again, a performance.
I remember I went
ball.
to this concert of this band, Canadian band called Arcade Fire. And in the concert, one song, a person walked to the stage like a ballroom ball, and all lights towards her,
projected back,
and the whole thing kind of
Right.
it was
Exactly.
wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So that's basically what we did with her too. And then we filmed it in the studio, and it's got some really nice electronic music to it. And so.
So Bjorn, I want to take you back a little bit to the conversation. So
Sure.
We kind of like make like a brief insight on the Dusseldorf scene, how that kind of shift of what Kraftwerk became after. So I wanted to know, like, your opinion, your vision, your perspective on how, like, the electronic music, the dance music from Germany kind of take over the world after, like, how
after Kraftwerk?
After, let's say, in the 80s, like,
80s.
you know, the raves and all that stuff, like, how you see that from your perspective, and how you kind of, like, see that's gonna keep going, or where heading off.
Okay, so to me that's good and bad. Unfortunately, the good thing is that there are still a handful of individuals out there that just take everything to the next level. And those people don't care what other people do, and they just do what they do, and therefore they're original. You know, like a Timo Maas or, you know.
Yeah.
But when you look at the overall development of electronica music, the thing that disappoints me today is that you listen to a drum and bass song that just came out, it sounds exactly like a drum and bass song from when it first came out.
Goldie or something, yeah.
What's the point of that?
It's an echo, I think.
So, but it's not just that. To me, it feels like let's not even talk about top 40 music, because every time I turn on Kiss Radio, I hear the same song. It doesn't matter if it's this year or last year or next year or the year before. It's always a big booming 808 kick drum with really fast, really piercing short decay hi-hats, and a black chick going. Okay, well, the first time I ever heard that, I thought, wow, that's unique.
And then
the second time I heard that, I thought, well, wasn't that already done before?
Yeah.
And how many times have I heard that since?
over the
It's like
years,
a formula.
It's a formula. And I feel that
You're overusing.
everything now is a formula.
Yeah.
Everybody has their thing that they like. I'm really good at house music because I got the deal, and I got these remixers, and I got these clients, and this is my shtick. That's what I'm going to shtick to. And so that's all I can do or want to do. And I feel too many people are doing that because they're just so comfortable, and nobody has the guts anymore to do something that's
more creative.
more creative or just different.
and artists need to be like multifacéticos. How would we say that? In the sense that I remember that, well, more than that,
Different facets.
Yeah, different
Different
facets.
facets.
Because I remember when we were in our teenage years, either you liked, let's say, metal music, but you couldn't like punk. If you liked punk, so it was like very
Restrictive.
Yeah, you were like categorized, and you couldn't merge.
Right.
You weren't even friends with those people.
Right.
Right. That was so lame because at
Yes.
the end, an artist is this person who is very sensitive, right?
Yes.
And in constant reinvention of
And very
itself,
unique.
and very unique.
Yes.
So why this idea of like like something stagnant, like just there?
I think the
very
main
square.
reason is that all those little synthesizer manufacturers like Oberheim and all these guys, they're all out of business. I mean, Moog is still around.
Yeah.
You can buy a brand new Mini Moog that doesn't sound anywhere near what an original Mini Moog sounded like. So I don't know why anybody would want that.
Korn too, right?
Hmm?
Korn?
Who's that?
Korn synthesizers?
Korg?
Yes.
Yeah, Korg. I mean, that's Japanese. Korg, just like Yamaha or Roland, I don't really consider those serious instruments. I mean,
Okay.
some people are going to
Mostly
hate me
for
now.
beginners.
There are some really good Roland synths, yes. But overall, let's just say a Moog or an Oberheim or a sequential box just does something that's a lot more unique. And back then, everybody was attracted to this one very unique thing that they had, or maybe two or three, but that's all they had because that's all they could afford or have even access to, or this is all these reasons. Today, all those reasons are gone because every person can purchase every music instrument online just by a click of a button, and it's delivered tomorrow. So, I want to learn this thing. I want to have one of those. I need this sound. That's not how artists were thinking back then. They were thinking differently. They were thinking like, well, this can maybe produce. They were thinking, okay, I need to produce something in my head. How do I make that?
what tools do I need to make this?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was
And
like
today it
now
more
it's the other
feels
way
like,
around.
what tool do I need to make that sound there? Well, I don't care about that sound there. I only care about that sound in here.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys and Connie and all these guys, they had sounds in their heads that they were pursuing.
Yeah.
And they were trying to make them real with the poor tools that they had. Today, everybody has the same computer.
Which is more challenging.
Everybody has the same omnisphere, the same drum loops, the same sounds, the same string sounds, the same piano sounds. Everybody has the exact same tools. How do you expect it to be
sound
different?
different.
It miss the magic of anything else because it's so
Yes.
easy
10
to
seconds.
access to.
What I do to
that
force
magic.
myself to
Yeah.
potentially create something different is I eliminate something out of my toolbox and force myself to only
Invent, create.
exactly to make this thing work with just that. Well, how would I do that if I just have just this and not all these modern things? And let me just think in those realms. And,
I like that.
And then you can come up. I mean, I'm not, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm not judging. but
We're
just-
trying to be
Yeah.
different, and
Yeah.
how can you be different?
Keep
But
the
like
authenticity.
in that
Same
sense,
thing.
It's hard.
They had the same problem already. They already knew. Whoa! Now we're having a mini moog, but everybody else can have a mini moog too. Our mini moog
what
needs
are
to
we-
sound
What are we
different.
gonna do? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
So like in that sense, like we come down maybe and some sort of like idea of come down a little bit politic about it because raves start as a political thing. And now these days, I know people that go to like electronic festivals, like raves and that
EDC
type of stuff. Yeah. But they don't have any type of sense or idea how political that is, so they just go to have fun, which is fine. I
Right.
mean, I'm not gonna judge
and the
that.
outfits,
It's pretty
cool, why
valid.
not?
But I feel like the track of it, like the bond that people used to have with that type of protest of putting music out there on the public space and enjoy the pure connection of enjoyment kind of lost. Now people go to get into drugs, which I'm not judging about it, but like the connection with the political idea is kind of lost. Why do you think that happened? What's going on?
It's more the disinterest of the artist today. And again, this is a harsh statement from somebody who was a little bit older. But again, it seems the earlier you look in time, not just here, but let's look 50 years prior. And, there was a Trautonium before we had Moog synthesizers, right? And in 1930, Oskar Skala was the first to produce electronic sounds with a monster out of tubes that couldn't fit in this room, Where was I going with this?
The political aspect behind going, like the detachment of the raves and that scene.
Oh, right,
the
yeah.
political
right.
background.
Okay, so I believe the disconnection between the audience and the artist,
And the phenomenon.
which is the same thing. But what I mean by disconnection is, let's say a rave or an EDC. Everything's pre-programmed. These guys also pre-programmed everything. But it's different because there was still an element of, okay, 90% is programmed, but here is that little melody that is not the same on every show or on every song. And that's completely gone.
But also,
Now everything is pre-programmed. The light show, the lasers, the music, everything.
We're gonna
And I
play
think-
this songs here.
right, but let's say
And I think you don't have the connection to the real human being on stage
Right.
anymore because you're looking at gigantic movie screens and all this beautiful imagery, which is cool, but it distracts from the artist, from the person. Just like we were saying when we're talking about a show where the guy is this small on a stage and you're 300 meters behind him.
and you're looking at him through a screen. That's the
And
end
you're
of the
looking
day.
at a gigantic screen because you can't, and you hear the music like you're standing right in front of him.
Yeah, it's more.
You're
But also-
disconnected.
yeah, also the
It doesn't make
distraction.
sense to have
Yeah.
20,000 people in a show. It's much better to have 1,000 people in a show, because then they can feel that artist.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's like the connection or that atmosphere that they both parties create is like autonomous.
Yes.
It's not about the DJ or the artist.
Of course, everybody is their autonomous world.
Exactly. It's like a feedback they receive, and like, how am I responding to the attitude of the crowd? And
it's all merging together too.
And it's a huge responsibility because you have like 1,000 people. And, you're receiving
this like type of band, let's say Foo Fighters probably now these days, the type of band that they want to play in huge scenarios, they want to play in a stadium, and they kind of like commit themselves to do that, a show for like a huge audience. In the case of Kraftwerk, in my opinion, they have an aesthetic, they have an idea, they have something to propose to the people. So kind of like, at the end, like obviously the music is important, but also it's pretty important what they want to offer as a proposal. But like I come back to what you say, they have it in their head first,
right? And
they try to find the means to put it on display. But now this day, I feel like, well, there's some band, let's say Justice or Daft Punk used to be too. They used to create this proposition to the audience. But at the same time, now, everything's kind of like big already. Like people go to a place and they know what they want. They want to just get high and get into drugs and just dance.
Right.
But the same question again, like what happened? What happened? Why the artist or the people who is on stage doesn't propose anything, and why the people don't really demand something else?
Why are they so disconnected?
Technology.
I think technology, yes, you're right. Because
you're with the phone.
If you look at Kraftwerk, it's all about technology. It cannot be any more technology, but you were always close to it. I don't remember if Kraftwerk ever played a stadium. I don't think they would do that.
You see an idea behind Kraftwerk.
No, what I'm trying to say is the closeness
to the
of the artist and what happens on stage to the audience is important.
Yeah.
And because you're so close to them, because even when you go, I mean, now they're coming back and they're going to be at Disney Hall. That's a small room if you think about it.
Yes.
Right? I mean, how many people fit in Disney Hall? 1,000 maybe?
Probably.
1,500 at the most?
Yes.
Right? I mean, awesome. I remember seeing them at the Hammerstein in New York. That was 2,000 at the most. Like every time I saw Kraftwerk, it was never more than 1,500 or 2,000 people. Why? Because they want people close to what's happening, because they also know that if you're 100 yards away, you're disconnected. You're on your phone, you're doing your drugs, you're doing whatever,
It's not the
and
music,
they want you to
experience.
The commitment with the phenomenon.
Yes. And I think these guys in those days were really able to capture the soul of the very last person at the end of the room because the room wasn't so big.
Are there... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a question. Nowadays, there's also like this trend of going back and this nostalgia behind everything in particular, right? Do you feel or do you know about any bands or artists who are like going back in time per se and like rescuing all this kind of like the handcraft behind the music and the tools they use and all this?
Well, there are a few people, I wouldn't know how to name them particularly. I'm so much more in the film world now, but as an example, Tarantino would come up. He's the guy who says, let's throw all that digital crap away. Let's shoot 70 millimeter film. Let's go back to the big screen. Who cares what it costs and what effort it is? It's better. It's going to be a better experience, better entertainment. And that's kind of what you're saying, right? I mean, it's the same, this is film, but as far as music, it's really the same issue, right? It's the exact same issue.
Well, yeah, you're right. With the Beverly
cinema. It is a kind of thing of a format too, right? It's like the format.
Exactly.
Yeah, but how you witness all in your life, you might have like different perspective, different times. What is your perspective? What you think is going to happen in live acts, like music in general, and electronic music in particular?
I'm afraid it's not that much. Because as long as we all stick to the same tools, like I said earlier, which everybody does, I mean, I can give you an example. The last time I had a really nice, presentable recording studio where people could come to, where I would potentially work for other people, because right now I'm really only doing my own music for my films. But I had a room where I had probably 17, 18 vintage synthesizers all set up. I mean, the room was huge, and every synth was mint condition, museum condition, plugged in, a Pro Tools channel, ready to go. Mm-hmm. And I remember this early 30s producer kid came in and looked at that room and looked at all that stuff, and he said to me, I have no idea why anyone would need any of this.
Wow.
Really?
And I said to him, well, if you and your clients don't hear the difference, good for you.
We don't need you too. Goodbye.
But here's the thing that I have to say, and I believe we were talking about this earlier. Modern pop music these days, I mean, every time you listen to a top 40 song, you might not be aware of this, but you're listening to 200 tracks of backing vocals on every song. Okay? 200.
In each song.
In every pop song that you hear. Every time you hear a backing thing of anything, it's hundreds of tracks.
Whoa.
Okay, back when we only had 24 tracks on a tape, you couldn't do that, right? So now you have all these tracks, and you have mixing capabilities in Pro Tools where you can mix 500, 1,000 tracks together with ease. Now, if you have that much stuff going on, and there's a synth line or a synth sound or a bass or anything synthy, it's just one of 500 things.
We're not even using quantum computers.
So it doesn't even really matter anymore, because you're listening to 500 things already. So how could your ear even discern that one synth sound to be, oh no, that's a vintage blah, 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 versus no, that's just a plug-in from a laptop.
So like it's not human capacity.
You can't really even hear that difference anymore.
I bet you can't even tell. I mean,
the only place where you can really make a vintage synth shine is when you're sparse. And when you only have a handful of elements and a handful of tracks like these guys had in the day, where every sound was a prominent sound, a featured sound. Rarely there was a little background sound. Everything was featured, right? Everything was, here's our melody.
More raw.
More raw, more
like
simple,
like purists.
but more pure and more effective and more vibe, right? And so my take is a vintage synth is a beautiful thing if you have a sparse track where you can really feature the uniqueness of that instrument. And if you're making pop music, or if you're making stuff that has 200 tracks of backing vocals or 50 tracks of kick drums layered on top of each other, who cares?
So it will be a fair statement.
So that's why I said to the guy, if your clients don't hear the difference or don't need the difference, good for you. But I was never striving to have those type of clients, because I'm always striving to have those clients that hear the difference, because that's what I'm
the
all
texture of the sound.
This reminds me of your studio. What was the girl that is very famous right now that you mentioned?
Oh, Maddie?
No, the other one that you actually met.
¿A musician?
Yeah, que ha salido en estos... Billie Eilish? Billie Eilish. I remember you were telling me about her. Something...
I was talking about the consolidation of the record industry. Should we touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, please.
I mean, remember Madonna?
Yes.
Madonna was on Sire.
Yes.
Was acquired by Warner. And what did that do to this company? It made them so much money that they were able to say, hey, we have all this extra money. Now we can develop all these other artists. And we're going to have all this new music because Madonna made us so much money. Well, what's happening today is the extreme opposite. Interscope has Billie Eilish and a bunch of others. One of my favorite artists is Maddie Noise. I was actually able to do a track with her, which is on my film. And she is amazing and incredible. And she was signed with Interscope at that time. And then Billie Eilish blew up. And what does Interscope do? they fire everybody because they're saying, well, Billy makes us the money and none of these others do. So I guess we don't need him. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference between the record industry today and the record industry back then.
Again, politics.
Back then, companies were run by individuals. Mm-hmm. Okay? Chris Blackwell. I mean, let's just talk about
people
individuals
who actually were passionate about music.
Passionate about music, right? Mm-hmm. Today, not a single record company, major record company,
like
is owned by anything other than a Wall Street company.
Yes. It's a brand.
They own other businesses, like and it's just one aspect, and it has to make money because the next quarter they have to have an earnings report, and that has to satisfy the investors. So it has nothing to do with music, art, developing art. It has nothing to do with, well, let's make a record for this artist, and the first one might not be that great. But the second one is going to be great. Now, who would do anything like that
no
today?
one takes a risk.
You can't even get a record deal unless you have 1 million followers.
Yes.
Which is really stupid, too, because
we're getting there.
Like my friend at Interscope says,
we're far from there, but like we're getting there.
If you have the newest, best thing in music, no one will care.
It is mostly like you say somehow like the people who own the music are not musicians or passionate about music.
Right.
That's
exactly what it is.
Based only on numbers.
There has been a little shift, right? Now they're fighting for their independence. We can see people like detaching in legal terms from their record labels, Taylor Swift or Grimes, for example.
Right.
But also like
also we have a friend that worked with us. His name is Diego. Saludos, Diego. He has a produced label. Mm-hmm. The name of it is El Mar Record. Mm-hmm. So Diego, we asked him about this same topic, and he had a different opinion. He says like, actually, there's people that the things are become more complex. But my question is like, go from this side. Let's say, to master the electric guitar, it took decades.
Yes.
And people develop different
to develop hearing without you being able to play anything will also take decades.
And like it takes time, takes effort, take like a passion, it takes many people and efforts and everything. So that's how we get to a time right now where like electronic guitar is an instrument where people is amazing of it. And we have history back there.
Of course.
Like, you think that could happen to electronic tools as well as an instrument?
Now you call me
go back after commercial break.
I wish you would have asked me that before.
We did not agree on this question. I'm so sorry. This is when you bring your lawyers in.
Wait, I gotta call mine.
Right, you didn't tell me.
Yeah, don't know. Really. Sorry.
A minus. I have one question.
Sure.
I don't know if we're running out of time or not. I'm not aware. I lost track of time because I'm having lots of fun. But we have a lot of elements right here.
Oh.
Not only our beautiful stuff in La Última Canción, but we also have like the album Kraftwerk, the book. And I'm very curious because the only thing we haven't actually like touched or mentioned are those CDs right there.
Well, I just brought a few classics, Autobahn and Trans-Europa Express, Radioactivity. Also, La Dusseldorf should be mentioned because not only the name obviously gives it away, but also produced by Connie, the same guy that engineered and produced Kraftwerk. It's electronica, but more soft, more poppy, so not as edgy or as rhythmic as Kraftwerk necessarily. And then I thought I'd bring you guys a German
version
record because you might not know that all of Kraftwerk's records are released in German as well as in English. So here's Die Menschmaschine, which is the man machine. And the whole thing it's all German.
German.
It's all German.
Amazing.
It's really crazy.
And 1978.
1978. Yeah.
Can you tell us about a little bit of Klingklang? That's the
Klingklang is the Dusseldorf studio of Kraftwerk. This is something that took a long time to build. So the very first record was not recorded at Klingklang. I don't know exactly when the studio was built. I believe it was maybe 75, 76, like mid 70s. It was all established. And then it was pretty much the most sophisticated studio in Dusseldorf that anybody could have, and you couldn't rent it.
And
because it was just for them.
They are the owner of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, they built this entire room with all the specially modified equipment from Synthesizer Studio Bonn, and that was Klingklang.
Produced in Dutchland.
Dutchland, yeah. I don't know if it's still like that, but I used to go to the webpage of Kraftwerk, and they have these things where like you can touch it and it's like clink, clank, clink. You can do like that.
That's clink, clank.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
That's
That's a good
amazing.
detail.
No, that
Nice.
webpage was amazing. I don't know if the same nowadays. I haven't been there in a while, but like it used to be really nice, pretty interactive. Well,
Yeah, and then Autobahn. I mean, you guys probably know that.
I know this one when I was back studying about Kraftwerk. Yeah. There's
So
a video.
it's a 20-minute piece, right? And so the whole idea was that the 20-minute piece portrays traveling from Düsseldorf to Hamburg on the Autobahn. And so it's a musical voyage of a trip from Düsseldorf to Hamburg. And the area around Düsseldorf is very industrial. Everything north of Düsseldorf, like steel, Krupp, and all those, that's all there. And coal, and it's pretty dirty and pretty
Very
industrial.
round
So basically the rhythm and the beat and the techno aspect of the track portrays that. And then when it mellows out and it has the lyrical flute and all the mellow stuff, that is when you drive through the Munsterland, through the countryside, past the industrial side where it's all green and lush and the birds are chirping. And
also,
so that's
when I was studying, Davy Boy, like this track. And
Yes.
I was very interested then with Kraftwerk.
Well,
That's
David
when
always
David
wanted to
Bowie
work with
started to get
Kraftwerk,
it,
but
yeah.
it never happened.
But
And
like
he wanted
also the Autobahn has like the type of chord of the Beach Boys. Bang, bang,
Also,
bang, and the
also.
Autobahn with the same sound of the Beach Boys.
right.
Yeah.
It's, yep.
But what happened with David Boy?
Well,
Yeah, tell us about David Bowie.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if
I was
can
asking you
Bowie came
before
to
about
Dusseldorf
it.
twice, and he was turned down twice. And basically, Ralph and Florian said, "We're unique in our own way. We don't need you."
Bye.
Then David Boy is also unique in his own way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He
And-
actually ended up recording in Germany anyway with Brian Eno, the Heroes, and that album is amazing.
But I know that David Boy got inspired from this one. From
Sure, yeah.
the road, from the Germany time and everything, yeah. From the-
So,
from the song.
Bjorn,
must be
something you
very
want to tell us
interesting.
about what's coming for you? I invite the people to watch your movie.
Yes.
Tell us what's coming for you and invite people to find
Okay.
you in the
Okay.
internet
Whatever you
world.
want to say before that.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can-
yes.
Yeah, I still
Yeah.
wanted to say a little bit
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the
yeah.
radioactivity.
Oh, okay.
So radioactivity, I don't know if you guys remember this, but it starts with just that,
Oh, yeah.
and then it gets faster and
Do it.
faster and faster and faster and faster and faster until, and then the song starts.
Uh-huh.
So Iggy Pop used to say he would fall asleep to the sound of Geiger counter. That was his sleeping music. So he would just put on the record and go,
Well,
and that would put him to
Sleep on
sleep.
the pup.
I'm gonna
He would
try
sleep on the
that.
pop.
The pop to
you need
sleep.
that. You need that.
The
No,
pop,
no.
pop to sleep.
Connie, again, we're going to have to show that book there. Connie, who produced and engineered the first few Kraftwerk records and also recorded the basic tracks of Autobahn in his VW van on his mobile sound equipment, because he actually had a 2-inch machine in his van. So he drove to Düsseldorf to record the basic tracks of Autobahn, and then they went to the studio, Connie studio in near Cologne, and mixed it. And at some point, when it started to chart, the American record companies became interested. So a guy from Capitol Records flew over to meet with Ralph and Florian and Connie to make a deal about, hey, we need a 3-minute version of the song. We can't, there's no way that you ever have a 20-minute version. It's not going to happen. So you guys need to edit a 3.5 or 3-minute version of that song. So they were all going to have this meeting. And for some reason, Connie couldn't make it. It was just Ralph and Florian. And so they met in Hamburg and they cut him out of the deal.
They cut Connie out?
Yes.
Wow.
Basically, the guy from Capitol Records said, here, why don't you give Connie $5,000? And
that's it.
Shut him up.
That's even worse.
Wow.
And that's what they did.
That's even worse.
And
That's
Connie took that money, although he shouldn't have, but he never worked with them again after that.
That was cut tie.
Disappointing.
So that was that story.
That's
For the short,
who you
version of
think it was the mastermind behind the Kraftwerk phenomenon?
Well, it's definitely Florian. I mean, he is the guy who's pulling it through to this day.
And the ideas and everything.
And it was his writing and his ideas. But just like anything and everything, you can't do anything alone. And he couldn't have achieved what he achieved without Connie and without the others.
Yeah, Ralph,
And also, if you realize how, I mean, of course, Ralph and Florian are also the most credited writers on almost all the tracks. I believe there's a handful of tracks where there's maybe a third one. I think Michael might be part of Michael Rother. He might be part of a few tracks, but you know, mainly it was just Ralph and Florian.
they are like the core of it.
Right. Yeah.
True.
But it was really weird, as brilliant as they were, you know, they also had a little bit of a, you know, they weren't like if they would go to clubs, they would just stand in the corner and not move. And everybody's dancing and having a good time. And there's these guys just, oh, look, it's Kraftwerk over there. Really? Is that them? They're so weird. How come they're not moving? Like, you know, that was just
like
a
this.
right, exactly. So I guess that was just their image. They always had to portray that image every single second they were out there. And that was just a little
how they are in
weird.
everyday life, like going to the restaurant.
No, but you know what? I also like was looking at it that they didn't interview so much, so their images are not like,
Right.
oh, I remember this back in like the
That's
90s.
right.
I interviewed them in so and so program or at the news. They're like so private about
Yes,
it, and
they're
so they're
very-
not. If you look at them, you don't see really like these back in the day at this hour at this concert. They interview Bjorn.
That's very
they're
interesting.
pretty
Because we're
like-
always
Yeah.
talking about the artist behind, but then there's this
This image.
and then
But that was
there's
the
no
thing.
way to like approach it in
Right.
some way.
But yeah, you do
Yes.
when you're
so
in
it's
the
like
concert.
in a museum, right? Like they're
Right.
there, but
Yeah.
do not touch.
Right, but then imagine a concert with robots. I mean,
Yes.
how do you connect to that?
Tell
I mean,
us,
the
tell
whole
us what
thought
you
of that,
tell
right?
us what you were telling me about the project that
idea.
they wanted to try, but they didn't ended up doing it.
Oh, when they came up with the robots, they thought of doing the entire show with the robots, which they never did. I do remember seeing a few shows where, you know, the curtain comes and then it opens again and now there's the mannequins and it's just the robots and you see, you know, the song done with the robots, of course, you know, or model or whatever, a few songs with the robots and then they come back. So I've never seen an entire show with robots. I don't think they ever did that. But what they were going to do was, the thought was, let's do the entire show with robots, and not only do the entire show with robots, but let's do the entire tour in one day. So that we have 20 dates in 20 different cities,
That's cool.
but we're doing every show on the same day because
same
we
time.
have the robots. And then nobody will know where we actually were or if we were part of it or whatever. So that was kind of like, wow, wouldn't that be cool? But
That would be
would
like
be-
a
happen.
happening.
That
I mean,
would
the
be-
synthesizer
yeah.
studio bond would have made a lot of money off of that project because they would have had to 10 times duplicate all their equipment or 20 times.
But
So
that would
that's
be
why it
really
didn't.
That would be
interesting.
really
But what a
cool.
great idea,
No,
right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
everyone
That
will
would
have
make
And
a
see,
lot of
today you could easily do that.
Yeah.
Because today everything's on a laptop and you could literally just have your show, your
Manage
setup, your
everything
robots,
from-
and,
so, yeah.
and
Or
you could do that.
holograms, like gorillas.
No, I mean, the
So-
robots
For example.
really,
Be a
they were better
mannequin.
than holograms because it was a
Machine,
It was a machine,
again,
but it was
machine.
also a textural thing. It had
the mass
something.
Is there.
You know, it was
but despite
it had mass. It was a body. Yeah, it wasn't a human, but you just wanted to touch it. You were standing. You just wanted to touch these things, and you couldn't. And,
it's like, oh my god, no, those are the real person.
Right? You know? And then when they came back, are they now real?
I mean,
this mystique was a big part of the show.
Despite the fact that they look so like formal and distance, they had like a really great sense of humor. Like, this is funny because there's a sense of humor behind that.
It is. I mean, also the fact, they had custom shoes and their clothing was custom. And I mean, nobody, like their instruments were custom. Everything was custom. So you couldn't even look like them or that was their thing. They wanted to be unique.
For the new generation, how you think they're going to, especially in Germany, how they're going to portray Kraftwerk?
I don't even know. It'll be very interesting to see this new show. I remember seeing the last show that I said I saw in New York, which is now probably 20 years ago. Everything was as original as I remember. There was nothing different at all. Everything on stage looked exactly like in the 70s. So it'll be interesting to see if they're going to do that again. I mean, to have it at an acoustic venue is very interesting because Disney Hall is for acoustic music. That tells me they're going to have a very small PA and they're not going to blow everybody's head off because they're going to take advantage of the sound of the room. They're very well aware of it. I mean, the reason that they book 10 days in a row there means they're up to something.
They know.
They know what this is. And
it's like you said, they have this set up, but then at the same time, they have this new thing that they're going to surprise the audience with.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll find out. Yeah. I mean, they probably should, since it's now only Florian and the 3 original members or even any of them are gone. So I would say this would probably be the right time to say, hey, let's put a different spin on this, But will they? I guess we're going to have to go to find out.
We're going.
We're going in May, everyone.
It'll all be AI.
And guys, please watch Laserium.
Les vamos a estar contando sobre cómo estuvo ese concierto. Vamos a ver si podemos hacer, ya sea en Instagram, en TikTok, en todas las redes que tenemos, a ver si podemos hacer un capítulo especial para reportar la situación, a ver si podemos tener a Bjorn de nuevo, porque probablemente vamos a ir con él. Así que...
Y también, disculpa, pero I want to know about, it's Laserium, and then if something else that you're working on in the documentaries?
Yes, I'm working on another film right now. It's called Sky People. And it's about Native Americans and astronomy. So it's a whole different thing than Laserium. I mean, Laserium is Americana. It's all about lasers, electronica, music, technology, all that stuff.
People abroad USA, where can they get this?
How you can buy the Blu-ray on Amazon, and you can watch the movie on Tubi, as well as Google Play, YouTube, and all like Roku. So
check it out.
It's got regular distribution in all the regular channels, except it's not on major television, but on Roku
and the next war when you think we can actually see it.
That's a good question I would like to answer, but I cannot answer.
But not yet.
But basically, just to sum it up in short, the next film is, like I said, it's called Sky People. But the main aspect of Sky People is that there was a big fire, a big wildfire that, we have, that we're more accustomed to these days. But this is a story about a wildfire that happened in 2006, where up near Mount Pinos, which is just a little north of Los Angeles, there was a big 150,000 acre wildfire that was burning out of control for over 30 days. And as everybody realized that there's nothing they can do to stop this thing, this was also the very first time they ever had fixed wing aircraft, and not just helicopters, but thousands of firefighters, and everything they did couldn't fight that fire. And then after 30 days, it got really close to a few cities like Fraser Park and Pine Mountain Club and a few places up there where they said, well, we can't have that happen. We need to stop this fire. How do we do that? So the only way for them to do that was they came up with cutting a dozer line, a 7-mile wide dozer line over this mountain, literally destroying all
nature,
of it.
basically.
Not only beautiful hundreds of years old trees, but also destroying a mountain that's sacred to the Chumash, which are the local natives. And so before anything like that could happen, they have liaisons, and the forest and the fire department, they just don't do that without talking about it. So they had a meeting with the natives, and they said, look, tomorrow we're going to have to do this, because if we don't, there's nothing else we can do. And so they had a little powwow outside, and they came back in. They said, yep, that's okay. You got to do what you got to do. But then they had a meeting of all of them, all the natives and the fire people and the rangers and the forest people. They were all there together. And then the native woman, the leader, she said, let's have a prayer circle. So they all got together, had a prayer circle, and the woman sang some songs in the native Chumash language and held some prayers. And 5 minutes after the end of that circle,
the fire stopped.
It started to rain.
Wow.
And the wind changed, and that was the end of the fire.
Beautiful.
What?
That's coming up.
So that's going to be Sky People.
Yeah, Sky People.
Coming up.
Oh my God, I want to see that. Oh, I got great
Very
respect.
different from this.
I got great respect for Chumash.
And
I know
there will
some
be
of them.
music with Native Americans that I've already completed
on.
lots of tracks for, and lots of strings, and also electronica. There will be synthesizers. Absolutely.
Great.
They will not be forgotten.
That's great.
Keeping it real.
Great.
Okay.
Wow, what an honor, Bjorn, having
Bjorn,
you
so
over
thanks
here
for
in La
having me.
Última
Looking
Canción.
forward to that.
It'll be a little while.
No, it's like it's a great honor that you
Try to remain
tell us in
alive.
advance what's gonna happen. With that. I mean, amazing. Thank you so much.
You're very
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank you,
having me.
Shen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shane.
It's an honor. Yeah.
Y bueno, gente de La Última Canción, un gusto estar acá de nuevo. Gracias, Jessica, por estar
Ay,
nuevamente
gracias
acá.
por invitarme otra vez.
Oh,
Catalina.
Laserium. Sí.
Laserium,
Bjorn. The house.
Yes.
Como siempre, recuerden seguirnos, compartir el capítulo, seguirnos en las redes sociales, comentarios, haters, bienvenidos. Y eso,
Siempre.
cariños, this is a wrap.
Muchas
Muchas
gracias.
gracias.
La última
Que estén bien.
canción. Thank you,
Abrazo.
Shen. Gracias, Bjorn.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love it, guys.
Yeah.